Coming up on Arirang News, U.S. President Joe Biden makes a surprise visit to Kyiv, promising more arms for Ukraine. It's his first visit to the country since Russia began its invasion of Ukraine almost a year ago. North Korea fires 2 more ballistic missiles off the Korean peninsula, followed by an ICBM this weekend in response to the Allies' joint exercises. Responding to Pyongyang's latest ballistic missile provocations, Seoul decides to implement additional independent sanctions on the regime. The 4th prototype of South Korea's own fighter jet KF-21 Borame completes its first flight successfully, signaling advancement in the country's jet development project. Hello, it's 9 p.m. here in South Korea. Thank you for joining us on Arirang News. U.S. President Joe Biden's surprise visit to Ukraine is where we start this evening. President Biden announced a $500 million of additional assistance to Ukraine during his visit to Kyiv on Monday in a show of solidarity. The fresh package will include more military equipment, including artillery ammunition, more javelins, and howitzers. Biden's historic visit to Ukraine marks his first trip to the country since Russia's invasion began nearly 1 year ago. This also came at a critical moment in the conflict as Russia prepares for an expected spring offensive against Kyiv. North Korea continues with its missile launches, firing 2 more short-range ballistic missiles this morning. This follows just 2 days after an ICBM launch in response to the Allies' joint exercises. The regime also warns South Korea and the U.S. that it could turn the Pacific into a firing range. Our Defense Ministry correspondent Oh Soo-young talked to military officials and experts to read between the lines.
North Korea's missile launches over the past 3 days were aimed at making a political point rather than a technological improvement. The regime's firing of 2 short-range ballistic missiles into the EC on Monday was followed by unusually swift state media reports denouncing South Korea and the United States' combined air drills held the day before. The exercise had mobilized key U.S. strategic assets, including B-1B bombers and F-35 stealth fighters, in response to North Korea's firing of an intercontinental ballistic missile on Saturday. Compared to past reports by the North, which included specifics about new technical enhancements to its weapons through testing, the latest reports focused on condemning the South Korea-US alliance and the alliance's scheduled joint drills. While the regime bragged about its tactical nuclear weapon systems and threatened to use the Pacific as a missile firing range, South Korean military officials and experts say the frenzied statements reveal little about the North's actual capabilities.
It is clear that the North Korean government and the armed forces are feeling pressure to demonstrate that the intercontinental ballistic missile of North Korea, ranging from Hwasong-15 to Hwasong-17, are indeed capable of hitting the United States. The country has not mastered the essential technology to have the ICBMs re-enter the atmosphere without any significant damages.
Also, an official at Seoul's Joint Chiefs of Staff told reporters Monday that it's unlikely Pyongyang is able to mount a nuclear warhead onto the 600mm multiple rocket launcher used Monday morning, as verifying this would require further weapons testing. The official added that the North on Saturday is likely to have chosen to launch the smaller Hwasong-15 ICBM rather than the newest Hwasong-17, as the earlier model is closer to completion, now likely in the final stage of verification. The North's testing of the Hwasong-17 ended in failure last November, as it broke apart and crashed into the sea after second-stage separation. Also, by launching the smaller ICBM, it seems the North is saving room for bigger provocations. Seoul and Washington believe the North may escalate its activities over the coming weeks, as it has key state anniversaries and a satellite launch coming up in April. Oh Soo-young, Arirang News.
In related news, Seoul's foreign ministry has been quick to respond to Pyongyang's latest provocations. It's placed additional sanctions on individuals and institutions who have helped the regime to develop its nuclear and missile programs and evade sanctions. Here's our Yoon-jin.
On Monday, the South Korean Foreign Ministry announced independent sanctions on North Korea, the fourth round under the Yoon administration. The latest sanctions target 4 individuals and 5 entities linked to Pyongyang's weapons programs. Those blacklisted include Lee Sung-un for negotiating trade deals involving weapons and luxury goods, Kim Soo-il for engaging in trade activity that has earned foreign currency for the North Korean regime, Lee Seok for transporting electronic components from China to North Korea for use in rocket development, and Vladlen Amchentsev, a Russian-born South African national who has helped North Korea buy oil illegally. The 5 institutions, including 2 Singaporean shipping firms, have either been involved in dodging maritime sanctions or trading North Korean coal and exporting oil into the regime. The sanctions are a response to a series of events, which include comments on Friday from the North's foreign ministry, which warned that South Korea and the United States would face unprecedentedly persistent and strong counteractions should the 2 countries go ahead with planned military exercises, with one slated for Wednesday. North Korea followed the threats by firing a Hwasong-15 intercontinental ballistic missile on Saturday, which, according to the state-run Korean Central News Agency, was organized suddenly without prior notice. On Sunday, South Korea and the U.S. staged unscheduled combined air drills. Then on Monday morning, according to South Korea's Joint Chiefs of Staff, North Korea fired a pair of short-range ballistic missiles off its east coast. Yoon-jin, Arirang News.
Repeated missile tests by North Korea has prompted the international community to respond with strong condemnation. Jung Eun-ju has more.
North Korea fired 2 short-range ballistic missiles off its eastern coast on Monday morning, drawing quick condemnation from the international community. This is North Korea's second weapons test in 3 days. The weapons firings followed an intercontinental ballistic missile launch Saturday after North Korea on Friday warned of unprecedented strong responses if the U.S. and South Korea go ahead with planned military exercises. Saturday's ICBM test was North Korea's third in less than a year. Seoul's military and the U.S. responded by flying long-range supersonic bombers later that day for separate joint exercises. The U.S. Indo-Pacific Command on Sunday stressed its ironclad commitment to the defense of South Korea and Japan and said the missile launches highlight the destabilizing impact of North Korea's unlawful weapons programs. South Korea's military strongly condemned North Korea's missile launches on Monday as an act of significant provocation that harms peace and stability, a clear violation of UN Security Council resolutions, and urged the North to immediately stop such provocative acts. Japanese Prime Minister Fumio Kishida also pushed for an emergency United Nations Security Council meeting on Monday, saying Japan would continue to deepen cooperation with South Korea and the U.S. in a show of unity against North Korea's provocations. United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres strongly condemned North Korea's latest launches and reiterated calls for Pyongyang to immediately desist from further provocative actions. Meanwhile, the Special Representative for Korean Peninsula Peace and Security Affairs, Kim Gon, spoke over the phone with the U.S. Special Representative for North Korea and Japan's chief nuclear envoy to North Korea. The 3 countries will further strengthen cooperation for thorough implementation of UN Security Council resolutions. They also agreed to make efforts to block North Korea's nuclear and missile development through sanctions and continue communication and cooperation for China's constructive role. Jung Eun-ju, Arirang News.
The United Nations nuclear watchdog has found uranium enriched to 84% in Iran. That's just below the 90% required for a nuclear bomb. This is according to the International Atomic Energy Agency and is the highest purity uranium ever found in Iran. Iran has been gradually boosting its enrichment since 2019, 1 year after the United States unilaterally withdrew from the 2015 nuclear deal. Since then, Tehran has been declaring enrichment of up to 60%. But the spokesperson for the Atomic Energy Organization of Iran says this wasn't done intentionally and that purity of over 60% had happened before and was nothing out of the ordinary, and called the accusations smearing and warping facts. The spokesperson also added that the accusations are being used as a political tool to pressure Tehran. The fourth prototype of South Korea's KF-21 Borame fighter jet has succeeded in its first flight just about a month after prototype number 1 reached supersonic speeds in a test flight in January. A two-seater, unlike the 3 that came before it, prototype number 4 took off from the Air Force's 3rd Flying Training Wing in the city of Sacheon, about 300 kilometers south of Seoul at 11:19 a.m. on Monday, and flew for 34 minutes. Only one pilot was aboard for Monday's flight, as it was only to check the model's safety. That's according to the nation's Defense Acquisition Program Administration, which added that prototype numbers 4 and 6, another two-seater, will be used for various tasks, including pilot training. Numbers 5 and 6 will also be tested in the first half of this year under a plan to conduct some 2,000 KF-21 test flights by February 2026. On the sidelines of a security forum in Germany, Seoul's foreign minister and his Japanese counterpart saw little progress on efforts to settle the compensation of Korean victims of Japan's wartime forced labor. What remains now is a political decision, says the South Korean minister. Our foreign affairs correspondent Choi Min-jung with more.
South Korea's Foreign Minister Park Jin met with his Japanese counterpart Yoshimasa Hayashi and urged Japan to make a political decision to resolve the issue of compensating Korean victims of Japan's wartime forced labor. The two held a separate one-on-one meeting in Germany on Saturday on the sidelines of the Munich Security Conference. Upon his arrival in Incheon on Monday, Park told the press once again that he called on Japan to make a political decision to come up with a sincere response.
We are sincerely doing our best, so we are expecting Japan to respond. We have narrowed our opinions to a certain extent, but there is still room for more discussions. We will do our best until the end.
Seoul's foreign ministry also said in a statement that the two diplomats agreed to communicate closely to resolve the thorny issue. The Japanese foreign ministry said the top officials had a frank discussion and agreed to close communications on each diplomatic level. Saturday's talk was Park and Hayashi's 5th meeting since President Yoon took office. The meeting also followed a series of recent working-level talks between the two countries on the issue. Last week, Seoul and Tokyo's first vice foreign minister sat down in Washington to discuss the ongoing dispute without reaching a conclusion. In January, Seoul unveiled plans to compensate the victims through its own public foundation. However, this prompted backlash from the victims, who insist the issue cannot be resolved without a sincere apology and participation from the Japanese companies involved. In landmark rulings in 2018, South Korea's Supreme Court ordered 2 Japanese companies, Mitsubishi Heavy Industries and Nippon Steel, to compensate the Koreans they subjected to forced labor, but those firms have refused to comply with the orders. Tokyo says the issue of compensation was settled under a normalization treaty signed in 1965. Choi Min-jung, Arirang News.
The first group sent by Korea to help with earthquake relief efforts in Türkiye has vowed to continue taking part in similar rescue work during international crises. That's according to the leader of the group, Won Do-yeon, dispatched by the Korea Disaster Relief Team, or KDRT, speaking to reporters on Monday. Won thanked all those who supported the team's efforts while calling for greater attention to international relief. His team of 121 officials returned to Korea on Saturday after 10 days on site. The KDRT were sent just a day after a 7.8 magnitude earthquake struck southern Turkey and northern Syria. The United States is pledging an additional $100 million in fresh humanitarian aid to quake-hit Turkey and Syria. The announcement was made on Sunday during U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken's officials' visit to Turkey. $50 million will be allocated to emergency refugee and migration funds, and the other half to humanitarian assistance. This will come on top of the $85 million in support the U.S. has already provided since the earthquakes devastated the region 2 weeks ago. The U.S. has also sent a search and rescue team, medical supplies, and equipment. Blinken had arrived in Türkiye on Sunday to support the quake-hit country and to discuss NATO membership bids from Finland and Sweden with the Turkish president. Korea's car exports seem to be riding above the global doldrums. In fact, its auto exports hit fresh highs for the month of January thanks to a strong performance of eco-friendly cars. Our economic correspondent Shin Ha-young has details.
Even though South Korea has seen a decline in its overall exports recently, car makers posted record high exports for the month of January. According to the Ministry of Trade, Industry and Energy, the value of car exports last month came to over $4.98 billion with an on-year increase of nearly 22%. The number of cars exported also rose about 11% from the previous year to over 200,000 vehicles. This was mainly thanks to the popularity of environmentally friendly cars. In terms of units, an all-time high 57,000 eco-friendly cars, including hydrogen and hybrid vehicles, were exported last month with an on-year rise of nearly 30%. The dollar value of these vehicle exports also jumped to a record figure, reaching nearly $1.8 billion, up around 42% from the same month a year earlier. The ministry attributed it to the strong performance of electric cars, which saw an on-year rise of 67%. Behind the popularity of EVs, there was a steady demand for Hyundai's electric car, the Ioniq 5, and Kia's EV6 model, while the overseas release of the Ioniq 6 also had an impact. Hybrid cars also contributed to the overall auto exports, with their exports up by 13% from a year earlier. Meanwhile, exports of related components dropped by about 16% from the year before as the exports to China declined. Shin Ha-young, Arirang News.
President Yoon Suk-yeol says there will be harsh retaliations against labor unions that don't comply with the government's request for accounting transparency. On Monday, Yoon added that as large amount of taxpayers' money goes to supporting labor unions, they cannot refuse to follow the law. During the day, the president was also briefed by the labor minister Lee Jung-sik. He said that the government will show zero tolerance on the 207 labor unions that are yet to conform, and after a 14-day grace period, fines will be issued to those yet to comply. This comes as in December, President Yoon ordered for necessary actions in creating transparency in labor accounting for members to access as it is the current law. He said this is the first step to labor practice reformation, one of his three main reformation goals, along with the nation's pension and education systems. More and more travel restrictions are becoming a thing of the past these days. And as our Lee Soo-jin reports, tourists are returning to South Korea, especially to Myeongdong, partly driven by visitors from Southeast Asia.
The shopping area of Myeongdong in central Seoul was hit especially hard by the COVID-19 pandemic and the resulting drop in tourists from China. Chinese tourists made up nearly 34% of all tourists to Myeongdong in 2019, but their numbers fell sharply to 3.3% last year. Tourists from other parts of the world are now filling the void. The proportion of travelers from Southeast Asia, for instance, more than doubled from 13.1% to nearly 27% over the same period. Shops and restaurants in the area are adapting to their new customers. Behind me, you can see signs that have been translated, and you can also hear street vendors calling out in languages from all over the world. Many shops also show the halal certification mark, which ensures that the product is safe for Muslims to consume.
As a tourist, I feel like I can try more of Korean food, not just typical halal food that you...
Restaurants selling Korean food have also diversified their menus so that visitors with certain dietary requirements can try traditional Korean cuisine. One such restaurant is Hangaram, a restaurant run by a traditional Korean food expert.
Since foreigners from all over the world come, we have decided to cater to their dietary needs. We created a harmony between certified halal food and traditional Korean food, and we also offer vegan options.
I'm coming from the U.S. There's a lot of Korean restaurants also in the U.S., but it's very rare to find like very traditional type of food. My mom, she likes to eat a little bit more like vegetarian, less. So we did have like an option for that.
With the influx of new tourists, the district is beginning to regain its vigor from before the pandemic. The vacancy rate of Myeongdong's small-sized properties had been as high as 50.3% in the fourth quarter of 2021, but has recovered to the point where by the fourth quarter of last year, just 21.5% of small properties stood vacant. However, experts say that more needs to be done for the area to fully recover.
If the economy continues to improve and tourists keep coming, Myeongdong will survive. But for vacancy rates to recover completely, it'll need to do something different.
The experts said this includes new initiatives such as creating more things for visitors to see and do. Lee Soo-jin, Arirang News.
Stephen Hawking passed away 5 years ago, but he continues to inspire many here in the country, including those with similar physical challenges, seeking to advance their academic horizons. Our Kim Jung-sil met up with them.
A moment to celebrate the years of hard work for the 18 students who are either entering their freshman year of college, continuing with their studies, or graduating with a diploma. All suffer from different types and levels of muscular dystrophy, a rare muscle-related disease that can hinder people from walking, talking, and even breathing. At the Pulmonary Rehabilitation Center here at Yeonse Gangnam Severance Hospital, customized treatment for each individual has enabled these students to finish school. Meet soon-to-be college freshman Minu, who was diagnosed with spinal muscular atrophy, or SMA, at the age of 5, a genetic disease that significantly weakens muscles, making it difficult to breathe or concentrate. But the treatment at the center helped him overcome some of the difficulties.
네, 그것도 있고 체력적으로도 좀 더 오랜 시간 앉아 있을 수 있게도 해주고 합니다.
Dr. Min Kyung-hyun, on the other hand, recently got his PhD degree in physics from Yonsei University. Calling himself a huge admirer of British physicist Stephen Hawking, Dr. Min wrote his graduation thesis using just one index finger on his keyboard.
뭔가 제가 도움이 되거나 할 수 있는 일이 있으면 뭐 취업을 하든 뭐 저희 교수님은 계속 책을 좀 썼으면 좋겠다고 하시는데 뭐 가능하면 네, 뭐든지 도움이 되는 일 하고 싶습니다.
Professor Kang Sung-woong looked over all of these students.
All I did was just help them breathe better. They couldn't even click a mouse button freely. And look at what they've achieved. It's so inspiring. As a doctor, I feel extremely rewarded.
He also said that he has a message to medical experts abroad.
We offer free educational opportunities for foreign medical experts. We think it's important that medical experts abroad can treat their patients in their own country. So if you're interested in pulmonary rehabilitation procedures, please reach out.
Professor Kang stressed that these types of rare muscle-related diseases are extremely difficult to cure, but that there is a way to live with them. He said that just like his patients, he hopes that more people around the world do not give up on their dreams. Kim Jung-sil, Arirang News.
Another cold front settled in this morning and temperatures plummeted into the minus figures. Tomorrow will be colder for most regions. Seoul will see morning lows plunging all the way down to minus 6 degrees Celsius. Other regions such as Uiseong will be colder at minus 9 degrees. Keep in mind the temperatures will feel a couple degrees lower than the actual readings. And we'll have no worries about fine dust tomorrow. The entire nation will see air quality standing in the normal to good category. For Seoul and parts of Gangwon-do province, the air has gotten drier over time. In fact, dry weather advisories are issued across the region. Cold, gusty winds will also accompany at times, so please be careful with anything that can start a fire. Inland regions will see clear skies for the morning hours. Tomorrow, Seoul and Daejeon will be starting up at -6 degrees. As for the daily highs, Seoul will get up to 4 degrees, Gwangju 6, Busan will be reaching 8 degrees Celsius. Until Wednesday, expect wide temperature gaps of 10 degrees in Seoul. That's all for now, and here are the weather conditions around the world.
That brings us to the end of the newscast on this Monday night. Thank you for watching. We'll be back tomorrow with the latest news in South Korea and around the globe. Good night.